بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا وسندنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So here we are again for another session in this Ramadan, inshaAllah, to answer some of your questions, inshaAllah. Let us proceed. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ji.
Maulana Sahib, Assalamu alaikum. First question tonight, Maulana Sahib. How can a woman make up their missed fasts when they have lost count of how many they have missed? So this can be due to various reasons such as menstruation, pregnancy and mental health related issues.
So missed fasts, فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ, the Quran says that you have to make up the number from other days. Of course, if you know the number of fasts that you have missed, then you would count them up one by one and make the intention of making up the missed fast. And you can do this any time between one Ramadan and the next, with the exception of the day of Eid al-Fitr and the Ayyam of Tashriq. These are the days around Eid al-Adha. These are the occasions when you're not supposed to fast, it's not permissible, but the rest of the year is open for fasting. And these fasts should be given preference over nafil fasts, because fard is more important. So rather than keeping the fast of Ashura and Arafah, the fard fast should be kept. And so it's important to count the number. There is, as they say, Taraweeh, meaning you're not obliged to make them up immediately after Eid. However, it might be sensible to make them up in the shortest possible time, so that it doesn't get delayed for years and years. If someone hasn't kept a record, and we should, then they should make an informed decision, an informed estimation. And so you can judge, for example, if it's a lady, then when she came of age, and then after that, from that time onwards, how many fasts is she likely to have kept based on her general memory, if she was keeping fasts at all, if she was keeping a few fasts here and there. And then this should be noted down, and then based on an informed estimation, those fasts should be made up with the intention that these fasts are to the niyyah should be associated with the relevant Ramadan. So the last one I've still got due, or the first one I've still got due, and then the first one after that, and then the first one after that, so that there's some specificity relating to. You need to make it specific in terms of which fast you are making up. So for example, if I've missed a fast this Ramadan and one last Ramadan, I should be specific about which one it is as well. And of course, if we don't know the exact amount, then if we do it in order, then the last one that's due upon me, that kind of approach. So in summary then, if we know, then we keep the exact number, and if we don't, we make an informed decision. And it is important that this is done. And if it's over a long period of time, alhamdulillah, we have lots of examples in our community of young and old ladies who are very particular about this. They will, in the short days of winter, for example, keep fasts regularly, even continuously. If circumstances allow, then this is something which is an option, because the length of the fast is perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be in the same time of the year that you miss the fast. So winter fasts are really easy. Or there's the Monday, Thursday option, there's the 3 days every month option. Those are days for nafil fasts, but you can keep the fard fast then. Or some Dawood is every other day, and that's for nafil as well. But you can keep your fard fasts like that, so that it doesn't weaken you and you don't struggle. You keep a couple of days empty of fasting, and you keep a couple more that way. But it is important, it's a faridah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we should be very particular about this, and we should try to make them up. Ji.
Jazakallah. Next question, Maulana. How can someone make up for missed Salah? The example here is someone who is now in their mid-40s but never has and still does not regularly pray their daily prayers.
So if we apply it to such a person who doesn't regularly pray, then their priority should be starting to pray regularly, and making up the past missed ones is the next step. So the first important thing is to pray regularly, and the reality is that on the one hand, it's inspiring to see large numbers of Muslims of all ages around the world who pray. Teenagers pray at school, and young people pray, old people pray in their offices. People will take time out and use their lunch breaks, and they will make a point of praying. People will pray when they're traveling at airports and at service stations, men and women, and this is how it should be. On the other hand, we have brothers and sisters who are perhaps not so particular, and this is where we have to wake up and realize that this is an obligation of Allah, who gives us life and every breath that we granted, every moment of our life, and we are answerable for our salah. It is the first and continuous obligation of Islam. As-salatu imaduddin. If there's one single pillar after iman, then salah is the pillar of iman. So it's enormously important. It has huge rewards and benefits in the dunya and akhirah, and there's a very severe warning for those who don't perform salah in the dunya and in the akhirah. Allah Ta'ala doesn't take responsibility for such a person. So we should pray, we must pray. And even if it's just the fard and the witr, the sunnahs are important, but the minimum is the fard, the obligatory, that shouldn't be missed, and the witr is wajib. If a person is praying regularly, then they should take the next step, and yes, even if it's for decades and years, we perform 20 rakats of Taraweeh prayer in Ramadan. It takes an hour roughly, and if you just perform 20 rakats on your own, it wouldn't take an hour, it might take you 20 minutes. It's not too much to take 20 minutes a day. So the ulama generally recommend that if you spend an extra 20 minutes, and it is 20 if you add the witr in of missed salahs, 2 of Fajr, 4 of Dhuhr is 6, and the 4 of Asr is 10, and then the 3 of Maghrib and the 7, the 4 and the 3 of Isha, that's 20 rakats. So if you take out 20 minutes every day, and you can replace your tahajjud prayer with these, some of the ulama have said that the nighttime qiyam all year will be sufficient, because this is the priority if you've missed lots of salahs. Or in the daytime, allocate a particular point of time. People allocate time for all sorts of things that they are interested in, recreation. These days just might reduce your time on your social media, and you'll have time to perform 20 rakats of prayer. Or you can perform one prayer with every missed prayer. So 2 for Fajr of today, and the 2 of what was missed, and 4 of Dhuhr, and so forth, and 4 of the ones which were missed. Again, the intention has to be specific. The most recent ones you missed, or the oldest ones you missed, and you keep that intention going, so it keeps moving forward or backwards, and it moves on to the particular day, which is the last or the earliest day, which is still due upon your shoulders. So it has been done. People in their 70s and older have actually spent time and done this as well. But time and tide doesn't wait for anybody, and death is coming our way for everybody. We're heading in that direction towards the akhirah, and so it should be taken seriously. Where there's a will, there's a way, and there's a sweetness in it too. It shouldn't be done as a burden. It's not like squatting. This is going up and down without any sensation. We are talking to Allah, and even in missed prayers, there's a pleasure to be taken if it's done as a sense of, with a spirit of devotion, and it's about that relationship with Allah. And people in the past, and I'll finish with this, and there's a big history here of all types of different categories of people, including people like for example Harun al-Rashid, who was the Khalifa of the time, and he ruled a huge expanse of land. These people had time to perform 100 rakats of nafil prayer a day and more, and they were busy. What actually happens is there's barakah in your time when you perform salah. So yeah, we should and we must.
Jazakallah. I have sweaty hands. My hands become sticky. If I touch an impure item with my sticky hands and then touch the Quran, is the Quran najis? Or generally, if you have sweaty and sticky hands, does your hands become najis if you touch an impure item?
Do your hands become najis, perhaps?
Ji.
Najis. Huh?
Ji.
Yeah. So the first point is, if you touch something inappropriate, unclean, then why would you touch the Quran after that? One ought to wash one's hands, and this is established from the athar, the narrations from certain Sahaba as well. There was in those days the mushaf was very large. It would be very large. This is in the Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah. This in particular narration, the mushaf would be very large and heavy. These days it would take a trunk to carry them, the size of a suitcase. You have some replicas available as well from of the original mushafs. So this would mean that sometimes someone would hold the mushaf. So a child is holding the mushaf for an elder, and he puts his hand into his garment and he scratches, his hand wanders. So what does the Sahabi says? Go wash your hand. So this is the adab. So when we're touching the Quran, you wouldn't put your hand into your mouth if you touch something inappropriate. If you wouldn't put your finger on your nose and then put it towards your mouth. So why would you touch the Quran? It does require a certain adab and etiquette. If you have wet hands, whether it's sweat or water, and you touch something, see, if you touch something which is impure but it's dry, and your hand is dry, then there's no exchange as long as nothing sticks to your hand. But if you touch something which is moist, or you touch something dry and it's impure with moisture, and there's an exchange of particles as a consequence, then obviously the impurity has spread, and so the hands will be washed. G.
With regards to your beard, what parts can you cut, shave or trim?
Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ did give us an instruction, أوفروا اللحى وأعفوا الشوارب, make the beard profuse, wafir, أوفروا from ifar, and أعفوا الشوارب, إحفا meaning you reduce the mustache. So with reference to the facial hair of a male, the beard is called a lihya in Arabic, and the jaw is called, the word lahyun is for the jaw. Lahyain are the two jaws. So you have the upper jaw and the lower jaw. Here's the upper jaw, this is the cheekbone, and the lower jaw is this one. So the hair on the lower jaw, that's the beard. And so the fuqaha say that any hair on the throat, not on the underside of the chin, but on the throat, that's not part of the beard. Similarly, hair on the cheek is not actually part of the beard, although it's a perpetual cycle. If someone becomes very obsessed with every hair follicle on their cheek, then they'll just be constantly worrying about their facial hair. But the point is, the cheek is not part of the beard, but the hair beneath the lower lip is also considered to be part of the beard. Number one. Number two, how much? It's one fist, one qabdah. Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma used to remove what was more than one qabdah. So when it grew longer, he'd trim it from the bottom. And there's both approaches. You can let all your hair grow from sort of ear to ear all the way down, and then if it's past one qabdah, you could remove what's beneath that. Or if your hair expands in all directions, you can reduce it to one qabdah all the way around. We actually see an example of this in the Quran, and we heard the recitation of this tonight actually, when Musa alayhi salatu wasalam returned from Mount Sinai, and he found that his people, Banu Israel, had begun to worship, a number of them, the golden calf. He was very angry with his brother Harun alayhi salam because he'd put him in charge. He says, so he laid down the tablets with some force, and he grabbed Harun alayhi salam with his hair and his beard. Yajurruhu ilayh. He was pulling him towards himself, and he's saying, why did you not, why did you not take your responsibility after me, such that you allowed this to happen? You shouldn't have allowed it to happen. And Harun alayhi salam explained his position. He says that I was afraid that they would kill me, and I didn't want to cause social strife and warfare between themselves. I didn't want you to say that you've divided up Banu Israel. So he gave his reasons, and there's a backdrop there. But the point is, he held Harun by the beard, qabda, which is a fistful, meaning he had that beard. The Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam and the Sahaba all kept beards. So it is important. And today it's an interesting time, because there's a new revival of the masculine identity, and actually in recent years the sale of razor blades has gone down, and males are beginning to rediscover their masculinity in terms of facial hair. So it's now, how can I say, it's trendy to keep a beard. It's the norm, it's in vogue. And so for the Muslim, the social pressures that might have prevented young people from keeping beards are perhaps not there anymore. There's every reason to keep a beard, and I think I could go on this subject, but I'll just conclude it with this point. So I hope that gives a good overview. And by all means, comb it and keep it neat and tidy, and oil it if you will, although I'm not sure that hair straighteners are a sunnah. That's not part of the tradition. It's good to be organic sometimes. G.
Jazakallah. Is it permissible to read namaz in the dark if it helps you concentrate?
Absolutely. You can turn the lights off. There's no problem with that, because in the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ there were no lights until right towards the end, when Tamim Dari radiyallahu anhu donated a lamp to the masjid, and it pleased the Prophet ﷺ very much. So it's normal, but what you shouldn't do is close your eyes, because that's not sunnah, and every sunnah matters. So you keep your eyes open and focus on the place of sajda when you're standing, and so forth, on your feet when you're in ruku, on your lap when you're in the tashahhud, in the jalsa position, and towards your shoulders when you're doing your salam. So you keep your eyes open, but by all means turn the lights off. There's no problem there.
Could you please explain the order in which you read the remaining rakat when you join the congregation late? For example, you catch the fourth rakat only in Dhuhr.
Okay, so the person who arrives late in congregational prayer is known as the masbuq, meaning the imam has preceded him, the congregation has preceded him, he came late. So if he joins a 4 rakat prayer, in the fourth rakat, see, there are two different types of counting which will take place. And the way it works in the Hanafi position is like this. Based on the hadith, there are various interpretations of the hadith about how you fulfill the missed amount. See, when we normally perform any number of rakats of prayer, 2 or 3 or 4, we will do at-tahiyyat, tashahhud, in the second rakat and in the last rakat. So if it's 2 rakats of prayer, it'll just be in the second rakat. If it's 3 like Maghrib, then you'll have the witr, there'll be tashahhud in the second and third rakat. If it's 4, there'll be tashahhud in the second and fourth rakat. So this is one type of counting, meaning which sajda is associated with tashahhud, meaning with reading at-tahiyyat. That's one type of counting. The other type of counting is in terms of what you recite when you stand up. So you start your salah with Subhanakallahumma thana bihamdik wa tabarak asmuk. This is known as thana, and then Suratul Fatiha, and then some Quran besides in the first and second rakat of every prayer. And then in the fard, in the third and fourth rakah, if there's a fourth rakah, as in Dhuhr and Asr and Isha, you will only recite Fatiha, and in the third rakah too. So this order is maintained separately. So what this means in practice is that if you've performed 1 rakat with the imam of Dhuhr, when you stand up, you're going to start from the start. When you stand up, thana subhanakallahumma. So the imam says salam and you stand up and you start off subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik wa tabarak asmuk wa ta'ala jadduk wa la ilaha ghayruk a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim bismillahir alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin waladdallin amin. Then a surah or some Quran, qul huwallahu ahad Allahu samad. Then in the following rak'ah you will again read Surah Fatiha and some Quran, qul a'udhu birabbil falaq, etc. So this is how it will be. And then in the last rak'ah you will only read Surah Fatiha. So it's as though you started from scratch after the imam. However, when it comes to the at-tahiyyat, this is a different sequence. You got 1 rakat with the imam, so the first one you performed on your own is your second one. So you'll now read at-tahiyyat in that first one which you read on your own, because it's your second one when you add it to the one which you read with the imam. And then the following one, which is the third one, if you add it on to the one with the imam, and your second one on your own, although you've recited Surah Fatiha and a surah, you now stand up and you don't recite at-tahiyyat. And then in the last one, it's your final rak'ah, and then you finish that off with at-tahiyyat. This is what you do if it's a 4 rak'ah prayer. And if you've missed 2 rakats with the imam, then you stand up and in the first and second rak'ah you recite. In the first one, Subhanakallahum surah, and you also recite Surah Fatiha and the surah. And then in the following one you recite Surah Fatiha and the surah or some Quran. And you don't sit for at-tahiyyat, because technically that's your 3rd rak'ah. And then you sit in the 4th one. And if you've only read 1 rak'ah with the imam and you've stood up, then you recite Subhanakallahumma and you recite Surah Fatiha and the surah, and you sit down and you recite tashahhud, because it's your 2nd rak'ah on your own. Then you stand up and then you recite Surah Fatiha and some Quran, and then you don't sit down for tashahhud, and so forth. So you're counting at 2 levels there. So I hope that gives a quick summary. Some of you may have to listen to this a couple of times. I hope this is useful. G.
What is the ruling on reading 20 Taraweeh verses 8?
20 verses 8. All of this is from hadith. All of it is from hadith. So my first question would be, where do we take our deen from? Where do we take it from? And you will say, perhaps we'll take it from Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the Quran and Sunnah. And I say, that's correct. My second question will be, where do you take the Quran and Sunnah from? And then you look at me and say, yeah, we take it from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. They are the direct students of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they understood it better than we did. And so if we want to be on the Sunnah, we can't sidestep the Sahaba. If we keep this point in mind, this mas'ala becomes really simple. Now, the narration of Aisha radiallahu anha mentions the 8 rak'ahs, and that's because she mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to perform 8 rak'ahs all year round, and that's correct. Tahajjud, nighttime prayer, was farad upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was an extra obligation, and for the rest of us, it's nafil. It's a sunnah and it's nafil for us. It's an option. But what we need to mark, what we need to notice is this tahajjud prayer of the Prophet ﷺ, it was for 12 months, number one. Number two, it was done individually. The Prophet ﷺ would not lead a congregation. On the odd occasion that someone was present, like when Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, who's the Prophet ﷺ's cousin, and he's the nephew of Maymuna radiallahu anha, the Prophet's wife, he stayed over one night and he joined the Prophet in prayer. But there was no large congregation. The Prophet first slept and then woke up. So the second point is there would be no congregation for these 8 rakats. The third point is this Salah was performed after sleeping. It was done in the latter part of the night, as we've just understood from the example of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. The Prophet was wake up in the latter part of the night. The fourth, so it would not be directly after Isha. The fourth point is it would not be in the masjid. The Prophet's night time 8 rakats would be in the house. And the fifth point is that there's no established example of the Prophet doing a khatam as we do it in Ramadan in that particular qiyam. So these are 5 reasons why that tahajjud is distinct from the Taraweeh prayer. So if you want to call that the qiyam of Ramadan, then it begs the question, why are you doing it in the masjid? Why are you doing it with a large congregation? And why are you doing it directly after Isha? And why are you only doing it for 1 month? And why are you doing a full khatam? So these are all questions and they're not answered. On the other hand, when we see the example of the Taraweeh prayer, the seed of this optional ibadah, is sunnah, was planted by the Prophet himself, because he opened a path for the Sahaba to do extra ibadah in Ramadan. And what actually happened is the Prophet came into the masjid and led the prayer himself in Ramadan one night. And of course the Sahaba were elated, because it's Rasulullah, Sahibul Wahyi, the person upon whom Wahy is revealed, and it's his beautiful voice, and it's in the nights of Ramadan, and it's a congregation of Sahaba, and they're following him in prayer. And so the second night is even busier, and this happened for 2-3 nights. And there are various narrations about how many rakats were performed. There's not any one narration, and this is distinct from that 8 rakats. We need to keep this in mind. Now what happened is then after this, the following night, the Prophet didn't emerge and the Sahaba had filled the masjid. They were busy waiting, because now they knew the Prophet was coming out every night. And they thought perhaps the Prophet is preoccupied, so someone clears their throat. They're sitting in silence and someone just disturbs a pebble on the ground. The masjid didn't have a carpet in those days. It was very simple, so that the Prophet's attention might be attracted, but the Prophet didn't emerge. And then after the time had passed and the Prophet eventually emerged, he explained that I knew you were there, but I didn't lead you because I didn't want Allah to make this wajib upon the ummah, be such that the sunnah of mine becomes so beloved, in other words, to Allah, that he says now everyone has to permanently do it, and that would be hardship for people who couldn't or wouldn't do it, and they'd become sinful. So for ease the Prophet didn't continue, but the Sahaba did continue. In the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq it continued, in the time of Umar it continued. Umar radiallahu anhu comes into the masjid in Ramadan and he sees Sahaba, and they're all Sahaba and Sahaba's children, Sahaba and Tabi'in. They're performing Salah in little groups, and all he did is he united them behind one imam, Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu anhu, Aqra'u hadhihi al-ummah, who's the biggest qari of this ummah. And the important thing to notice here is that Umar radiallahu anhu did this, but the entire congregation consisted Sahaba and Tabi'een, and no one objected. No one found this objectionable. And even though the Sahaba would object if Umar had done something wrong, once Umar radiallahu anhu had distributed garments, sheets, shawls of ghanima, and everyone had received one. And Umar came into the masjid and he was wearing 2, one around his waist and one over his shoulder, and he started his khutbah and he said, Isma'u wa ati'u, he says, listen and obey. And the Sahabi stood up and he says, La sam'a wa la ta'a, he says, we won't listen and we won't obey. He says, why? And he says, because you're wearing 2 and you've given us 1. Explain. There's been some injustice here. So Umar radiallahu anhu says to his son Ibn Umar, he says, stand up. He stood up, he said, tell them. He says, Ibn Umar, his son, he says, I receive 1 and father received 1 and I give mine to my father, and that's how he has to. So there the Sahabi says, he says, okay, now we'll listen and we'll obey. So the Sahaba would call out Umar radiallahu anhu. It's not as though he could do what he wanted and that he would get away with it, and he wouldn't want to do that, and he would listen. He was waqafan inda al-Qur'an, as the narrations say. When he heard the Qur'an's verses recited, once he gave a khutbah, and the Arabs even today, they give a huge amount of mahr, and sometimes it's very difficult for people to pay that amount. We had a nikah in this masjid. It was $1 million of mahr money that was being exchanged. The husband, that's what he was giving his wife. So this still happens. A suitcase of money might take you half your life to earn it. So once Umar radiallahu anhu stood up and he gave a khutbah and he says, look, people shouldn't give too much mahr. And an old lady stood up and she says, Umar, how can you deny us the right that Allah gave us in the Quran? And she referred to the surah, to the ayah, that if you a qintar is a hoard of money, a huge amount. If you promise that much, then you divorce your wife, you can't take it back, it's hers now to keep. So supposing you're with your wife for one night and you've given her $1 billion, you have your unicorn business and you've given her the whole thing. You say, I've not spent much time with this woman, I'm going to take it back. You can't in Islam. You've spent, you consummated the marriage, it's all hers. So she says, Allah has given us this right, and Umar accepted immediately. So Umar was very meek when it came to the Quran. He was afraid of Allah. And so, do you think he would do something that would take people to Jahannam? No. The whole Sahaba, the whole congregation. And it didn't stop there. Umar started this, and then, started this tarteeb in Masjid Nabawi based on the established example from the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq and Rasulullah's initial leading of prayer in Ramadan. And then he passed away, he became shaheed. So then it's the time of Uthman. He didn't stop it. He ratified and endorsed it. And then it's the time of Ali radiyallahu anhu, and he endorsed it. He's doing dua for Umar. May Allah fill Umar's grave with nur the way he filled our masajid with nur when he saw the masajid brimming in Ramadan. Then it's the time of Hassan radiyallahu anhu. He endorsed it. Then it's Amir Muawiyah radiyallahu anhu. He endorsed it. And then we can go through Islamic history, the Umayyi Khilafah and the Abbasi Khilafah, and then the various other, the Salajiq and the Atrak, the Turks, the Ottoman Empire. And it's only now, under the coronavirus lockdown, in the two harams since the time of Umar, over 14 centuries, one particular individual, it's attributed to his, subhanallah, masa'i, his efforts, that it's been changed. And it's not to the, this is displeased the ulama and the salihin of the Haramain Sharifin. I've seen myself in Medina Munawwara, the ulama of Medina, they're very unhappy with this decision. And one asks, it begs the question, how is these people going to face Umar radiyallahu anhu on the day of Qiyamah, this established sunnah for over 14 centuries? Sheikh Atiyah Salim, who is a Maliki scholar, and he would give dars in Masjid Nabawi Sharif, and he's very renowned, he wrote a book in which he wrote the name of every imam of both harams who had led 20 rakats since the time of Umar radiyallahu anhu till the present time, and he only passed away recently in our lifetime. So this is not something to be people, if it's not something that should bear on your conscience. Or how am I going to answer to Allah because I've performed 20 rakats of prayer? My friends, the whole ummah has done this for so long, and in Maliki fiqh it's actually more than that. It's because in Medina Sharif, in Medina Munawwara, in the time of Umar, of Imam Malik, which was the time of the Tabi'een, he's from the Tabu'ut Tabi'een, the people would perform 4, and then in the gap they would perform 4 individually, and then 4 more. So you have the 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, that's 20, and 4, 4, 4, 4, that's 16, 36 rakats in Maliki fiqh of Taraweeh prayer. So I'm saying if if 20 is not the right number, let's go up, let's become Maliki in this masala. Nobody wants to do that. Begs the question, what's the reason? Is it really to fulfill the sunnah, or is it because we don't have the patience to stand on 2 feet before Allah and listen to the khatam of the Quran once a year? May Allah grant us tawfiq. Ji.
What are the Makroo times of Salah?
Makroo times of Salah: when the sun's actually rising, when the sun is at its zenith, meaning the highest point in the sky, this is just preceding Dhuhr, 10 minutes or so. And when it's actually setting, this is just before Maghrib time. These 3 are Makroo Tahrimi. For Nafil prayer though, there's no Nafil prayer during the entire time of Fajr. You read the 2 sunnats, that's it. And you don't even, and you don't read the Tahiyatul Masjid either. And after you've performed your fard of Fajr, you don't read anything else until sunrise of Nafil prayer. If you have missed prayers, you can read those. You can also read Janazah, and you can do Sajdatul Tilawa if you recite Quran at that time. Similarly, after Asr, there's no Nafil prayer. If you've missed fard, you can read them then. You can read Janazah, and you can do Sajdatul Tilawa. Ji.
Is it permissible to touch and read from an English-only translation of the Quran during periods? Technically it is, although ideally there's an adab there too, but technically it is because it's not considered to be the Arabic, the original, the translation is but a translation. Although it's a separate matter that the way sometimes translations are published now as paperback with just the translation, this isn't ideal. The fuqaha say that, see, this is the preservation of the Quran. One of its zahiri asbab, meaning it's in the hands of Allah, but one of its means, zahiri asbab, apparent means, is that it's always published with the Arabic, so you can always cross-check it. And the Quran is the Arabic kalam of Allah, which is in Arabic, bilisanin arabiyyin mubin. So it's appropriate that translations are published in the same cover, between the same pages. Ji, but if technically, yes, you can't touch the translation. Ji. Can women enter the masjid during menstruation?
Nope, nor can men if they're in the state of janaba. If a man is in i'tikaf and he wakes up needing, after ihtilam, needing to do ghusl, he should leave the masjid immediately. And similarly, a woman won't either. These days, see, we are affected as a community by sort of popular culture and changing trends and traditions, and there's a lot of discussion these days about the stigma which is associated sometimes with menstruation. In Islam, there isn't a stigma. This isn't about stigma. This is about a Quranic ruling in terms of purity and impurity in Islam. So this is a separate point. I mean, in other faiths, from the Ahlul Kitab, you have one extreme where nothing is prohibited during menstruation in terms of conjugal relations as well, and the other extreme where he eats separately in a separate utensil and she eats separately. In Islam, it's in the middle, where intercourse is prohibited, it's haram, it's a very serious issue. But at the same time, they can interact and they can be intimate beyond the area between the navel and the knees, and they can eat together and so forth. So Islam has a balanced approach to this. But ibadah is ibadah, and this doesn't change because of popular culture. So it doesn't reduce a woman in a status at all in the eyes of society and in Islam because she is menstruating. The Prophet ﷺ would happily lie with his head in Aisha's lap when she was menstruating. There was no problem there. There's no issues here in Islam. However, prayer is prayer, and it is a condition in Sharia, and similarly to be pure from menstruation and from afterbirth discharge. And similarly, the purity of the masjid requires that we're not in the state of major impurity, which is when there's been intercourse or there's been ejaculation or a person is in the state of menstruation or afterbirth discharge. So the bottom line is no, you can't enter a masjid in that state. G. Although if a building or masjid has an allocated place separate to the actual masjid part, it's not designated as part of a masjid, then that would be permissible, and that would vary from place to place. G.
Is it allowed to have sexual intercourse in the month of Ramadan after the fast?
The first point, just let me mention that this example, say that Aisha radiallahu anha, her room was next door to the masjid and the door opened into the masjid. And so when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in i'tikaf, she was combing his hair. He would lean his head towards the door and her hands would extend into the masjid. She became concerned. And the Prophet told her that your hair is not in your hands, so you can reach into the masjid to pass something, for example, through a door. But the thing is, she knew this, and that's why she didn't come to the masjid. Similarly, when she did Hajj, she was crying. And the Prophet said, what happened? She says, I'm menstruating, so I can't do my tawaf. And so the Prophet made an arrangement for her, and she did her umrah, and Masjid Aisha is established. And so this sunnah of Aisha not being able to do her tawaf with the others because of menstruation is in the hadith. And so this is because she was menstruating. So this needs to be recognized and acknowledged. Sexual intercourse cannot be done in the state of fasting, absolutely not, because the things which are prohibited during fasting are food, drink and sexual intercourse, and this is clearly mentioned in the Quran. G.
The question was after the fast?
After the fast, of course, during the night. أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثْ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. The Quran says, so basically when you open your fast, everything that was haram because of the fast becomes halal. Sexual intercourse is halal from the time you open your fast till the time you close your fast for the next day. G.
Is saying Sadaqallahul Azim.
And in fact, let me just mention this as a side note. وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. The Quran says Allah has made it permissible for you to be intimate with your wives and spouses, and He says seek what Allah has written for you. Meaning even in Ramadan, when you are sleeping with your partners, with your wives and your husbands, your spouses, your intention should be to seek the children that Allah has written for you, because pious progeny is an honor and it's something that Anbiya desired. So this should be the goal of marriage. G.
Is saying Sadaqallahul Azim after reciting the Quran correct to do?
It can be done as a conclusion. There is ta'amul from reliable ulama through and so it can be said. It's just a statement that Allah's word is true, so you're affirming your iman. G.
Can someone request to change their mahr after marriage?
It will not be mahr if it's requested after marriage, because there's a couple of situations. Mahr is either mu'ajjal or mu'ajjal, in the sense that it has to be given before consummation or after, as agreed. but it's predetermined and agreed. And if it's not mentioned, then it's Mahr mithal, meaning it'll reflect the Mahr that a woman would typically be given of that woman's standing based on her social and status and status of her family in terms of what's the norm in her family. But no, proactively, a woman can certainly request her husband for some gift or something, but it will not be part of Mahr. It will constitute the Mahr.
In the Hanafi fiqh, can we pray other du'as in Qunood?
Yes, we can. Allahumma hadina fi man hadayt wa afina fi man afayt wa tawallana fi man tawallayt is also a masnoon dua, and it can be read as Qunood to the end.
Can a Hanafi pray witr behind another imam from a different madhab?
The odd occasion, one-off may be fine, but as a routine in Hanafi fiqh, it's not a single rakat doesn't constitute prayer. And so the recommendation is that in Hanafi fiqh that they should be performed with one salam.
Why is dua always made after Salah in many masajid instead of dhikr first?
It's not clear what the question is wanting to ask here. This is all based on the sunnah. I mean, the dhikr which is sunnah is after salam. We learn from the narrations that the Prophet ﷺ would say Allahu Akbar once, and then he would say Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah, Astaghfirullah. So there are adhkar after the Maghrib prayer and after the Isha prayer and after the Dhuhr prayer. There are sunan, and those sunnahs are important and people need to focus on them. So the dua is kept brief. The fuqaha say Allahumma biqadri Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam, meaning this short dua. So the dua after fard prayer should be short. After Asr and Fajr, because there is no extra prayer, people tend to sit for longer and do dhikr there. So it's not clear which type of dhikr is being mentioned here. The dua after salah is established in the sunnah, and some adhkar are recommended, such as Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar.
Well, we're running out of time, so we'll just do one final question. What's the ruling regarding purchasing a car on finance? I was advised if the loan company is directly with the company, it's allowable, including interest. If not directly via third party, if it's disallowed.
The question is not...
It's not very clear, but just a general aspect around car finance.
So the simple point is interest is not permissible to take or give, and so it is important and necessary to find an arrangement in which there's no exchange of interest. That's the bottom line. If you purchase something at a fixed price in installments with no sort of variation over a period of time with installments, then that's permissible. That's just putting it simple, but the general point is that interest isn't permissible. It's not permissible to take it or to give it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept what's been said and make it a source of guidance. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min an adilla aw udalla aw azilla aw uzalla aw adlima aw udlama aw ajhala aw yujhala ali. Subhanallahi bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.